Welcome. If you clicked on this video, it's likely that you're thinking about taking the Fire Protection PE exam, or you have already signed up for it, or you have already taken it in the past, did not pass it, and are thinking about retaking it. In any case, I hope that this video gives you clarity and confidence that allows you to be successful in passing this exam and getting it behind you. So actually, we have 15 cards here that after we get through this deck, hopefully you have all the information that you need to attack this exam. My name is Alpha Sala, and I am a mechanical engineer turned fire life safety engineer, and I have had the fortune of taking and passing the fire protection PE exam most recently, and prior to that, I took and passed the mechanical HVAC PE exam. So I hope that my experience is something that others can benefit from, and I can ease the minds of those who are feeling apprehensive in taking this exam, to let them know that they can do it. It is achievable, and it's not only achievable, it is not a difficult process. It is just something that is long and will require some discipline and effort. But the difficulty is just that, the discipline and the effort, not the actual technical side of the exam for the most part. Now, stepping back and looking at the bigger picture of the PE exam, the exam itself is one of the several steps, arguably the biggest step, within your journey to become a licensed professional engineer, particularly in the United States. Now, as a licensed professional engineer, this credential is one of the most sought after and authoritative credentials in the field of fire life safety and in general in the field of building design and construction. So you trying to take this, it is understandable that it may seem like a big endeavor, but it is something that is worth it and will open many doors for you, just as it has opened many doors for me. And I know many of my colleagues who have gotten promotions, who have sought roles that maybe they weren't qualified for previously, simply because they were able to get through the process of becoming a professional engineer. And again, the biggest step within that is taking the PE exam. So I'm going to summarize these 15 steps that I have right here. And if you want more detail, you can check out my blog post on noonfireblog.com with more in-depth details on these 15 steps, as well as my contact information is on that site. You can reach out to me if you have any questions along your journey. Just reach out. I'm available on LinkedIn via email as well, and I'm here to assist you as you need. Just think of me as your virtual mentor in this process. Now let's get into this deck and get through these steps. Step 1 is to apply and meet the prerequisites. Now, I won't get into too much detail on this step because the application process actually varies significantly across different states as well as different countries. I personally took mine in the United States, in Maryland, for my first PE exam, which was actually a mechanical and HVAC PE exam. I was later able to take the fire protection PE exam by just filling out a form after having my license for a few years with HVAC. Maryland allows you to take an additional discipline with very little paperwork after that. But in terms of the initial exam, this is something that you'll have to either call your state board or your country to see the requirements, or reach out to NCEES. I've reached out to them several times, and they actually can direct you to where you need to reach out to get that information. The prerequisites are typically educational requirements, as well as passing the FE Fundamentals of Engineering exam, number 2, and then number 3, some level of experience or number of years of experience that is validated through references and proof of experience reports that you'll send in to the board or to NCEES. As for the FE exam, I do have another video on that as well as a blog post on that on my website, noonfireblog.com. So you can also check that out there. After you get that information, the next thing is to actually apply through NCEES, and you will then book a testing center. And I recommend to sign up early. I cannot stress that enough. This exam is only given and offered once a year. At this point, I'm recording this in 2025. The exam is April of every year. So if you miss the window of application, either because you're too late or the testing centers near you or in your country or near your locality are full, you will then have to wait until the next year to take the exam, and that is not something you want to do. So apply early. Step 2 is to understand the exam format. For this, you will need to download the NCEES Candidate Handbook, which is very available on the NCEES site. And in that handbook, it'll actually give you a full breakdown of the number of problems, the time required for the exam, the testing procedures, the different nuances of accommodations and things like that. And it will give you essentially everything you need to know on a high level and logistics level for this exam. Just as a summary, this exam is a long one. It is 8.5 hours of active exam. This does not include breaks and the setup and introductions and things like that. So in total, it's actually about a 10-hour process from arrival to departure. But the active exam time is 8.5 hours. There are a total of 85 questions, and that gives roughly 6 minutes per question. So that's something to keep in mind, that each question you roughly have about 6 minutes, and that can help with your pacing as you're thinking about the exam and how much time you have for each question. The biggest question that actually comes up a lot is, what score do I need to pass the exam? Now, there's nothing I know of an official pass rate or percentage pass-fail grade that you need to get, but in the different courses I've taken, they have given a number of 75% is what you should aim for. You should aim to get a 75% on that exam, 75% of the questions correct. So that is not too bad, but it's also not as low as something like the FE, which is like a 60 or 55% score you need to get to be able to pass the exam. Going into some of the statistics of the exam, NCEES actually publishes the pass rates and the number of test takers for this exam for the previous year. So at this recording, we're in November or now December of 2025. They actually posted the results of the April 2025 exam. And the results are as follows. Essentially, it's broken out into two groups. Number one is first-time takers. This is the first time you're taking the exam. Number two is repeat takers. So for first-time takers, there was a total of 245 people that took the exam for the first time. The pass rate for those people and for that group was 80%, meaning 80% of the 245 people that were taking it for the first time actually passed it. Only 20% failed it. So that's actually a pretty good pass rate. For repeat takers, that number drops off a little bit. There was a total of 46 test takers that were repeat takers, meaning they failed it previously and are taking it again. And the pass rate for that group was 43%. And again, at the time of this recording, the exam was only offered once a year, and that's in April. As a means of encouragement, as we can kind of see from the pass rate of 80% for first-time takers, this exam is not trying to prove expertise. It's really just trying to prove proficiency. So if you are apprehensive or skeptical about your level of knowledge in all these different domains of fire protection, it's not necessarily that you should feel discouraged to take this exam. It's really just that you have to put in a little bit of work over a fixed amount of time, and you should get proficient enough to pass this exam. So it's not aiming for expertise, it's just trying to get that upper average or type of proficiency. Moving on to step number 3, which is to choose your study path. Do you want to do self-study or do you want to buy an expensive course? I personally recommend you get the expensive course. The reason being, the expensive courses have 3 benefits. Number 1 is accountability. The commitment you've made both financially and kind of informally by signing up for the exam will allow you to be more consistent. The next benefit of the courses is that they give very good and a lot of practice problems. Number 3 is that they limit the scope of what you're actually going to study, meaning they will tell you this is the type of problem you can kind of expect for this topic. This is the level of depth that they're going to go into on these types of questions. They really give you a feel for what you should expect to study, and they give you kind of a boundary of what is the best thing to study to get the most out of your study time. If you take, for example, fire alarm systems, if I was self-studying, I may be tempted to read all of NFPA 72, read all the enhanced content, read all the annexes, then also go into SFPE and NFPA handbooks and read all the chapters on fire alarm systems. That actually could take a huge chunk of my study time, if not the majority of it, and I still probably wouldn't exhaust all the little nuances of the system. And I wouldn't then be sure as to what I'm actually going to be tested on. And I would have wasted a lot of time getting into that stuff when I could have been getting into the other topics that are going to be covered on the exam. So the lectures themselves, they give you that scope and that boundary of what you should study, and that saves you a lot of time and takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. Now, I do think it is possible to self-study. I've seen others do it. And in fact, the majority of your time, even when you buy a course, is going to be self-study. So I can't say that you won't be successful if you do that. But like I mentioned, those are the benefits of the course. The way I thought of it is that it is an investment. If I take, for example, my time studying, if I'm going to spend, let's say, 250 hours studying, and let's say the SFPE course is $2,000. So $2,000 divided by 250 hours is $8 an hour. So it's almost like, okay, is my time to get a little bit of extra efficiency in my study worth that $8 an hour? And even more so if I fail the exam because I've spent time studying things that I shouldn't, or I didn't get the best form of study. If I fail it, is my time then to retake it and to restudy, is it worth that $8 an hour? So I felt it was justified, but you'll have to decide that for yourself. And definitely ask your company to reimburse it if they will. Meaning, if you do sign up for these courses, ask them if they will either pay upfront for it and kind of sponsor it, or if they will reimburse it upon you passing. I've seen both ways occur, essentially. Moving on to step number 4. That is to buy 2 NCEES approved calculators. If you go on the website for NCEES, they'll give you a list of approved calculators, so you will have to choose one from that list. I personally bought the FX115ES Plus Casio calculator, and I'll show it up right here. And I bought 2 of these. The reason I bought 2, one is my primary, and it's the one I use on a day-to-day basis while studying, and it's the one I actually use on the exam. And the second one, which I think is somewhere around here and actually maybe in my office, is the one that I kept in my locker on exam day as a backup. The worst thing that could happen on exam day is your calculator dies and you don't have a backup. And then all those months and hours of studying essentially are hindered and are kind of gone down the drain because you don't have a backup calculator. So I recommend two. These are like $15 online. They're not expensive. So just buy two, keep one in your locker on the exam day. Again, I like this one because of the functionality. I personally didn't know I would have an opinion about calculators, and I'm not getting any affiliate links for this product, but I like this because it actually shows the equations like you would write it. So if I write, for example, the square root of 2 over 3 squared, and if I hold this up, maybe you'll be able to see it. Essentially, it writes it out in with the small exponents on the top in a fraction form, and it just makes things much easier to visually verify, as opposed to the other calculators that give you a type of like Excel single line input, especially for things like the Hayes-Williams equation. If anybody's seen it, you have items to the factor of 1.85 multiplied by another factor divided by other factors to the 1.85 and to the 4.87. It's just very hard to visually track that if you have a single line type of Excel-like input for your calculator. So again, this one is the one I recommend. Moving on to step 5. The next tool you will need after the calculator for your study is the NCEES reference manual. This is the single most important document for your exam preparation. What it is it is the single document you will have during the exam. You will not have any other reference material on the exam besides this document. The previous exams, they allowed you to bring books in and different codes and things like that into the exam. But nowadays, now that it's computer-based, the only document allowed, which is actually what they give you as a PDF on the testing computer, is this NCEES reference manual. And I actually have it in the back here. This document you should use for every single study session, meaning you want to get so familiar with this thing that you just know it inside and out. You know where certain equations are, especially the oft occurring equations. I just mentioned the Hayes-Williams equation. You will definitely see that equation on the exam. You will see other fire dynamics equations. You will see certain hydraulic calculation equations, and you should know where those are in the handbook, because you're not going to memorize the equation itself, but you should know very quickly how to get to it in the book so that you don't waste valuable seconds on the exam trying to search around for that equation. I ended up, and I'll get into this in more detail in the next step, but I ended up just reading this like a book, like kind of multiple times even, just going through, flipping, checking, and making a mental map of, oh, this equation's at the beginning of the section. Oh, this table is kind of hidden under this image over here. You just kind of get a feel for where things are within the actual reference manual, and that helps significantly on the exam. So again, this step is to get this reference manual and use it for every single study session. Do not wait till days before the exam to download it and try to just skim through it. Step 6, treat the lectures as entry points, but then after that, prioritize practice and self-study. What do I mean by this? Essentially, if you go the route of the paid preparatory course, you will get some lecture videos, and then you'll also get some assigned readings, and you'll also get some practice problems. One of the traps, in my opinion, is that people think that if I just rewatch and rewatch and rewatch the lecture videos over and over, then I'm going to get a better understanding, and that's going to be my form of extra study. But really, the introductory videos are just that. They're just introductions into the topic, but the actual benefit and the actual depth and the actual solidification of the information comes from self-study, the readings, as well as practice problems. So within the self-study, like I mentioned, we have readings and then practice problems. And within the readings themselves, I broke it out into 3 different types of reading. Number 1 is the reading of the NCEES reference manual, as I mentioned, reading that, just literally reading it. Number 2, the second type of reading is the course assigned readings. These are typically within the NFPA handbook as well as the SFPE handbook. Sometimes it's in these codes and standards, but it's typically in those 2 handbooks. Then the third type of reading is to skim the actual referenced codes and standards for the exam. The exam itself only references NFPA standards. It does not reference the IBC or the ICC series. It references things like NFPA 101, NFPA 13, NFPA 20, 72, 92, 2001, NFPA 12, NFPA 11, and there's more that you can check on the NCEES website. I would skim those. I wouldn't read those too in depth, especially things like 72, 13, and NFPA 101. They are so long and they have so much commentary, and that you don't really need to read it in that manner. I would just skim it, get familiarity with the headings, the layout, and then as you do your practice, which is the second 50% of my time of self-study, you will use the reference manual, and you will also use and refer to those codes and standards as they apply. And you will then see what are the commonly referred to sections of that, and you'll get naturally familiar with those sections, for example, of NFPA 101, Chapter 7 for egress, and things like that. So again, just to emphasize that point, once you watch the lecture, leave the lecture aside. Let's say you have 8 hours allocated a week. You watch lectures and videos for 2 hours. You have 6 hours remaining. I would split that 6 hours into 3 and 3, 3 hours readings of those I just mentioned, and 3 hours practice. Step number 7 is to study all exam topics, even the weak areas. The quote that I remember from the SFPE study course was, "It is hard to hide a weakness on this exam." I forget which professor or which instructor said that, but I thought it was very true, and I found it to be true when I took the exam. Essentially, you want to study everything. This is not like an exam such as the FE exam, the Fundamentals of Engineering, where if you kind of skate over a few topics, it's not a big issue. You can just kind of focus on some of the core topics. In this exam, however, you really should study every topic. The topics are actually broken out into 4 main categories. The first category is fire protection analysis. This is 17 to 26 of the total of 85 questions. So it's about 20 to 30% of the total questions. The next is fire dynamics fundamentals. This is anywhere from 11 through 17 total questions of the 85. This is about 13 to 20%. Then the big one, which is active and passive systems. This is anywhere from 31 to 47 of the 85 questions, meaning a total of 36 or 55%, or 36 to 55% of the exam questions. So this, as you can tell, is a big chunk. The fourth is egress and occupant movement. This is, again, anywhere from 11 through 17 questions. and a total of 13 to 20% of the exam. So you can see that there's a kind of a spread. Although active and passive systems are about half of the exam, give or take, about a third to a half of it, that is also broken out into subdomains. So you should actually go to the NCEES website and go to the candidate handbook, and you'll see of those four, fire protection analysis, fire dynamics, active and passive systems, and egress and occupant movement, each of those has sub breakouts that you can also see there. The one encouraging thing, although it sounds like a lot to study, the encouraging thing is that the questions are relatively surface level, meaning they don't get into that much detail. They only have, like I said, about 6 minutes per question, 85 questions within 8.5 hours, so about 6 minutes per question. So they can't really get into that much depth on each question. So what that means is as you're studying all these different domains, you don't have to really master it to a point that you feel like you can go and design a project or stamp a drawing on that system. Really, you just need to get a level of proficiency, which comes very quickly, actually, especially if you follow the guided readings and stay within the scope of what the courses tell you to do. So that little amount of effort can actually get you those points, even in an unfamiliar domain. Number 8 is to stick to a long-term and consistent study schedule. Please, please, please do not cram and do not procrastinate. Again, long-term and consistent schedule. Do not cram and do not procrastinate. There is a lot of content, and the exam is, again, only once a year. So if you do procrastinate, if you do cram, hopefully you're not within that 20%. Actually, I should say you're more likely to be within that 20% of those people who failed. And that is not something you want to do because, again, you'll have to wait a whole other year to take it again. And the pass rate for second-time people is 43%, as we saw before. You just don't want to put yourself in that position. This exam is worth the effort to put in the long-term and consistent study for it. I personally studied for about 8 months or so, logging somewhere between 250 to 300 total hours, kind of an estimate. I probably studied around 8 to 12 hours per week, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less, depending on what life kind of was what was going on in life at that time. And I actually use and utilize Pomodoro sessions, which are, if you're not sure what those are, you can actually go on YouTube, just search Pomodoro study sessions. And what they essentially are is that you put on a timer for 25 minutes, you kind of lock in focus for that 25 minutes, do your studying. Then when that timer goes off, you back off, set another timer for 5 minutes, then take a break for that 5 minutes, sit back. Once that 5 minutes is up, you get back to it, you do another 25 minutes, 5 minutes off, 25 minutes on, and you keep repeating that. So this just helps break up the monotony of just kind of drudging through a single topic and kind of beating your head against the wall. It just gives you a new, fresh perspective and a new pair of eyes and a fresh pair of eyes as you get back to the new session. The next thing for the study schedule is that you will have to, however way you can, with the most convincing and loving way, negotiate with your family. Negotiate sacred blocks of time to study and communicate that early on. Be flexible, but also be a bit assertive in that, hey, I just need this amount of time. Even if you say it's 6 hours a week, 8 hours a week, spread out over the 7 days, just find the kind of golden hours that you know you are most productive. For me, it's the morning time. For others, it's nighttime. For others, it's no, I want to do everything on the weekends. But just find that time and just negotiate, hey, this is my golden hour. These are my times. Please, can I just have this to my studies? And anything we want to do after that, we can do outside of those times. So I'm not saying to put your life on pause, not saying to be a kind of schoolyard dog and bark and fuss at everybody who interrupts your study sessions, but just be firm with a fixed schedule and then relax and do whatever you got to do outside of that. The next step is to adopt a career applicability mindset. What does that mean? Essentially, as you're studying, do not study just to pass. Don't think I'm just studying to pass the exam. Study to apply this to your career, to apply this to real projects. I would say, and I've heard this from other engineers, that studying for the PE exam is actually really enjoyable. And the reason is everything you're studying is very applicable to your day-to-day workload, to day-to-day projects. Almost like I would study something in the morning. Like I said, I was a morning person, so I'd study from like 6:30 to 8:30 and then work from 8:30 to the end of the day. So I would actually, in some cases, study something in the morning, and either that same day or a day after or so, that would then come up on one of my projects. So it kind of reinforced that, hey, no, this is real stuff. This is not an exam like, for example, the FE exam, where it's like calculus and differential equations and trigonometry and all this stuff that really is not applicable. It's more conceptual. That, okay, study to pass. But for this exam, study to apply it to your career and to apply it to real projects. Again, it makes it more enjoyable, and it actually makes it better for retention. If you have meaning attached to what you're studying, you will retain it better, and then you will actually be more likely to pass the exam. Moving on to step number 10. Practice, practice, practice in the final weeks. As you get about 6 to 8 weeks out of your exam date, I recommend primarily prioritizing practice exams and practice problems. At this point, you've kind of consumed the content of the courses, the videos. You've consumed at least a good portion of the readings. Don't now go and try to cram in all the additional readings and the additional videos or rewatching videos, as I mentioned. Really, at this point, the best use of your time in the last 6 to 8 weeks is just to do more practice. This will get you in the habit of going through the process of receiving a question, looking at it, identifying the equations you need to use, going to the NCEES reference manual, getting that equation, solving it, putting it in your calculator, and then selecting an answer. That process in and of itself is a skill that needs to be fine-tuned. It's not just a matter of what you know, it's then how well are you able to actually do the process and the flow of answering a question. So again, the last 6 to 8 weeks, switch to practice problems. The Meyer-Fire course, like I mentioned, has really good, these 1-hour mini exams. They also have longer exams, but definitely you should buy the NCEES official fire protection PE practice exam. This is available on the NCEES website. It comes as a PDF, so you're going to kind of have to do some kind of creative stuff to make it function and get the experience of a computer-based exam. What I did is I took the PDF, I put it up, and I kind of I think I actually had an Excel sheet on another screen, and I went through and I selected the Excel sheet and put in A, B, C as my correct answers in that Excel sheet, so that it kind of treated it like a multiple choice input, the way that the computer-based exam is. Again, it's a PDF. It's not as nice as the Meyer-Fire exams that kind of does the whole experience for you, but the actual questions themselves are the most realistic and most like the questions you're going to see on the exam as you can get, because they are produced by the NCEES. Like, they're produced by the people who are making the exam. So that is the best resource you can use for your practice. Now, we are done with the study tips. We are now getting into the last days before the exam. So step number 11 is to physically prepare yourself for the exam in the final days. What do I mean by physically prepare? 3 things. There's probably more that you can think of, you know your own body, but the 3 that I can think of, number 1 is sleep, number 2 is hydration, and number 3 is minimizing caffeine. I'll go back to number 1, which is sleep. It is so important. It is probably the most important thing you can do to prepare your body for an exam. And one hint and one secret is that you will likely not sleep that well the day before the exam. That's just how people are the day before a big event, a big game, a big exam. Their nerves keep them up at night and they wake up a bit groggy. So actually, in order to combat that, because there's not a lot of ways around it unless you're somebody who's very stoic, very chilled out, doesn't get nervous. I'm not one of those people. So the way I combated that is I made sure the week before, or at least 3 or 4 days before the exam, is when I prioritize getting good sleep consistently for that week or for that 3 or 4 days. That way, I'm kind of giving myself a boost, or you can say savings of sleep savings, such that when I do get to that last day when I'm not sleeping well, I can then kind of lean on the fact that I'm already well rested beforehand, and I don't get as hindered by that bad night of sleep. So sleep early for the last week before the exam. It is something, first of all, it will be good for your body, and second of all, will be very good for your mind. Number 12, exam day prep. The exam is long and exhausting. It is 8.5 hours, like I said, of active test taking, not just reading and things like that. You're staring at a computer screen with all the blue light and white background for 8.5 hours straight. And that takes a toll on your body. So all of those things and everything you're doing that day should prepare you for that long stretch. So I'll kind of walk through what it looks like going to the exam. You will first arrive on site. Once you get on site, you'll put stuff in your locker, you'll check in, you'll do all the registration and things like that. Maybe it takes 15 or 30 minutes. Then you will be called back to go and enter the exam room. They will kind of pat you down. It's kind of like a high security prison. Well, they'll pat you down on make sure nothing's in your pockets, check your glasses, check your hands and your feet and your shoes and things like that. Make sure you have nothing that you can use to cheat. Then they will let you in to the exam room, assign you a computer. You will then get onto the computer and look at the instructions, probably about 10 minutes or so, 8 minutes of instructions on how to use the computer, how to use the different controls within the exam, and how to access the NCEES reference manual that you see on the screen back there. Once you go through that, there will be a button that says Start My Exam. You will click that button. You will then be given a batch of 40 or 45 questions, and you'll see at the top that the timer has started for 8 hours and 30 minutes, and it's just ticking down. So you'll get this batch of 40 or 45 questions. You will have to finish those 40 to 45 questions, then submit that first batch. It gets saved away. You will then get a 45-minute break. 45 or 50-minute break. You will then return. Once you hit, I'm ready to start session number 2, you will then get a new batch of 40 or 45 questions, and you'll be given the time that you had remaining from the first session. So the first session, you had 8.5 hours. Let's say you took 4 hours to complete that first batch. That batch is gone. You will then have 4.5 hours left, or 4 hours, 24 minutes, or 3 hours if you took way too long on the first session. So always you want to pace that first session to give yourself time for the next session. You will then take that 40 questions. You can't go back to the previous ones. You will solve those 40, submit those, and then your exam is over. You will then do your checkout and then leave the exam. So from arrival to departure, like I mentioned before, about 10 hours or so. So definitely wear comfortable clothes on exam day. Get there early. Don't overdo it with caffeine, but I did drink caffeine myself. But remember that there's only one scheduled break, which is that 50-minute break. I believe that if you need to go to the restroom during one of the sessions that is ongoing, I don't think the clock stops. Don't quote me on that, because I never actually had to go at that time, but I don't think it stops. So don't overdo it with hydration and caffeine the day of the exam. Just enough to kind of get you through. These are things that are a little bit intimate and personal, but you will be happy you had that information on the day of the exam. You don't want random things like that to kind of derail your progress and derail your performance. All right, let's get to the next step, number 13. Use the 3-pass strategy while taking the exam. What is the 3-pass strategy? It is essentially a test-taking technique in which you go through the exam in 3 separate rounds. You go through each of the questions in 3 separate rounds. How does this actually look? Pass 1, you're going to do all of the easy, qualitative, non-lookup problems, those that you can answer in 30 seconds, maximum 1 minute, that you know off the top of your head without looking anything up. You're going to answer those in the pass number 1. Pass number 2, you're going to answer easy problems, but that do require some lookup or some single or 2-step calculations, but you know how to do them, but they're just a little bit more, take a little bit more time. You're going to do that in pass number 2. In pass number 3, you're going to do the harder lookup questions, or those that you really don't know what to do. You're not sure what the approach is. That is what you'll do in the last pass. As a more specific approach in this exam, I'll just add that in the first pass, in order to not waste time clicking through each of the 40, remember I said there's batches of 40 or 45 questions. So in the first batch, there are actually some tools you can use on the computer-based exam that can help make your passes more efficient. The first pass, what I did is I answered the questions. Well, let's say I got to a question, I looked at it, either I knew it off the top of my head. In that case, I answered it and I moved on. The other option is that I knew it was an easy question that I would have to look up, but I knew how to do it and I kind of knew it just would take me some time to look it up. I wanted to do that for pass number 2, but instead of just skipping it, I actually flagged it. Because what you'll find out is that at the end of taking all of these questions, you get to a summary page, and the summary page will show you, okay, before you submit it, this is the status of each question. Either it'll show that you've answered it, or it'll show that you flagged it, or it'll show that you have left it unanswered. So it gives you 3 type of indications. So for those that I wanted to do in pass number 2, as I'm doing pass number 1, I would say, okay, this is not a pass 1 question. I'm going to do it the next pass. But in order to save the time of scrolling through everything again, I'm going to flag it. Therefore, when I get to that summary page, I can look back and I look for flagged unanswered questions. And I know immediately, I already looked at it. I know it's easy. It's a pass 2 question. So pass 2, I just went to those flagged unanswered questions. This is kind of getting into the weeds, but it may help for those who want to follow this method. Now, pass number 3, again, if it wasn't a pass 2 question and it wasn't a pass 1 question, it's going to be left as unanswered and unflagged. The past number one question is going to be answered. Past two questions going to be flagged, and now that I'm in past three, it's going to be answered as well. But past three, it's going to be the unanswered, unflagged. Therefore, I know to go directly to those, and I spend the time I need on those more difficult questions. This really helps maximize the points that you would have gotten in the upfront, essentially, in the beginning of your test taking. While your brain is still fresh, you're able to make sure you've gotten all the points that you know are low-hanging fruit first and foremost, and then after that, then struggle through those that you don't know very well. In high school and college, the thing that killed me the most was running out of time on exams. In this case, this strategy really helps that. And actually, once using this strategy, I don't think I've ever ran out of time on an exam after that. And I started this, unfortunately, after I graduated college, when I started taking all these certifications and things like that. I wish I knew it during college, but you live and you learn. Now, you've taken the test, you've submitted it, you've checked out, and you've left the test site. What's next, which is step 14, to wait for the exam results. The wait is suspenseful. It is something that I've heard people say it's worse than the actual exam, just waiting for it, waiting for it, waiting for it. So to ease that wait, there's kind of a hidden secret of NCEES, which is they typically release the scores of the previous week's exam on that following Wednesday, particularly in the morning Eastern time in the US. So if you took an exam Monday through Wednesday on the week, Monday through Friday, or even Saturday on the week before, that next Wednesday, the next following Wednesday, that is when you can expect to see the exams. Don't quote me on that. If it doesn't happen for some reason once or twice, don't come after me or anything like that. This is something that I've seen in all of the NCEES exams I've taken. I've taken a total of 3. It's been the case for all 3. I've seen it on posts like Reddit and online where people have had the exact same experience. So I am confident that that will be the case for a while, unless NCEES for some reason changes their policies. So you should, at the time of this recording in 2025, expect that the next Wednesday after your exam in the morning Eastern time, you should expect to see your results. Once you get the results, hopefully, with all this preparation, with taking a smart approach, you have passed the exam. So the last step, number 15, is to celebrate and look forward. However you want to celebrate, that's between you and that's your own decision. For sure, I would recommend thanking those who have helped you in your journey, especially those loved ones, family members who have had to accommodate different things. I know for me personally, it was my wife. We actually, at the time of taking the fire protection exam, we had a 1-year-old, and 1-year-olds don't sleep through the night for the most part, wake up every 3 to 4 hours. And we actually had a baby monitor. So even though she would be the one to usually get up and take care of him, I would be woken up every 3 hours by that baby monitor. So I kindly, in the most gentle and loving manner, negotiated and asked my wife if we can sleep in separate rooms for that last week or so before the exam, so that she can take the baby monitor and I can actually sleep consistently through the night. So I for sure thanked her, very much so. She was one of the first people I thanked, and I suggest you as well do the same and show that appreciation. The next thing is that you can look forward knowing that you don't have to take this exam anymore. This exam is not something you have to retake anywhere down your in the line of your career. It's something you take once, you pass it, and you move on. So you can kind of be at ease knowing that you've gotten that behind you. In states such as Maryland, where I took it, you actually get your PE license immediately after you get the exam result from NCEES. So I think the same day or maybe the day morning after, they emailed me, Maryland board, and just said, you are now a licensed engineer. Here's your license. Here's your number. So I didn't have to email them or reach out, but I know different states and different countries have different procedures. So you can check what is appropriate for your procedure, but definitely look forward and see what are the next steps that you need to do to actually get your license. Since, as I mentioned, the exam is just a step within that licensure process. Now, once you're licensed, you can start looking at promotions. You can start discussing with your employer about a salary raise. You can talk about things like increased responsibilities, increased scope, different projects to work on. You can even maybe look at other positions outside of your company that you previously were not qualified for, that were kind of out of reach, that are now in reach now that you're licensed. Again, like I mentioned, this is one of the most, you can honestly say it's the highest credential in this field, which is to be a licensed PE. So if you've passed, and once you've passed, I personally congratulate you. However, don't get too ahead of yourself. With every award and with every gift comes responsibility. So as a PE now, there are roles, responsibilities, and ethics that you'll have to uphold. You can actually find those written out. There's documents published by, for example, Society of Fire Protection Engineers, as well as your state board will have licensure, ethics, and protocols that you will have to uphold from now on for the rest of your career. You'll have to uphold a standard of integrity and ethics that is appropriate for a licensed professional engineer. Also, I would say look at the renewal process for your state. Typically, it's just paying a fee, doing some continuing education, and filling out some forms. But always, I personally made a spreadsheet of every date in which my licenses are to be renewed. Since now I have multiple states, I have to track which ones are renewed when, and you always have to keep up with it. There are penalties if you miss the dates and things like that, so always check those procedures. And the last and final advice after passing is to stay humble. After passing this exam, it does not actually mean that you are an expert. Like I mentioned before, it really just means that we are proficient. The licensure process in itself also has other things that it's not just passing the exam, it's also things like experience and so on and so forth. But I personally find it helpful to always remember that just because you hold this title, it does not mean you always have to be the expert or come across as the expert in every single thing that goes on in your career. It's not just, oh, now I'm a PE, I have to know it all. If you ask any seasoned professional engineer, they will tell you that, number one, they don't have all the answers. Number two, they're learning something new every single day. And number three, they're not afraid to ask questions, and they are not afraid to say, I don't know that right now. Let me go look into it. Let me go get second opinions. Do not feel like you have to hold this burden of this type of high position of expertise and hubris almost. So I would just recommend that you stay humble. So this was a long video. I appreciate you guys sticking through. These are things that I wish I heard as I was taking my exams. So I hope to give it to you guys to make you feel more confident and more competent and more able to attack and tackle this PE exam. If you found this helpful, check out the other videos on my website and check out the articles on noonfireblog.com. I really appreciate all your time and have a good one.